surcharge Ontario placed on energy powering New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford's threats to cut off energy altogether.
There would be grave consequences imposed on Canada if they think about shutting off electricity. Canada would be very wise not to shut off electricity for the American people, and we hope that that does not happen.
Not long after the White House briefing, Premier Ford announced he would suspend the energy surcharge after a phone call with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Ford described the call as productive, saying he'd been invited to meetings at the White House later this week. Trump himself then suggested he may ease up on his new threats against Canadian steel and aluminum.
The Ontario Premier calling you and giving you his decision about the electricity surcharge, and you said you were pleased about that. Will you make a different decision now about the tariffs on Canada? Will you reduce it?
At that, but probably so, yeah. He was a gentleman.
Just to be clear, sir, the 50%, is that going to go into effect on Canada or no?
Which one?
The 50% tariffs?
I'll let you know about it. Yeah, okay. I'll let you. But I appreciated his call. I thought it was nice.
The White House then confirmed it would proceed with its original tariff threat, 25% on steel and aluminum, no exceptions. Canadian officials are expected to respond Wednesday. A retaliation plan is being finalized, the size and scope of counter tariffs and other measures to be revealed then. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
It's no secret Trump's tariffs on aluminum and steel will hit cities like Hamilton and Saguenay hard. But the uncertainty is also being felt here in BC. The CBC's Shoria Chetri has more from businesses worried about tariff trouble.
Workers at this steel fabrication plant race against the clock, loading steel onto trucks bound for Seattle before tariffs kick in.
So it should cross the border hopefully sometime today.
Walji has been bracing for this moment since Trump announced the tariffs last month.
Overall, annually, about 75% of our business is actually southbound.
Here, raw materials are transformed into workable shapes for construction, shipped primarily to Washington, Oregon, and Alaska.
And we need big projects. There's not that many big steel projects in BC.
Walji says the most difficult part of the process has been the uncertainty. Trump earlier Tuesday had suggested he would double the metal tariffs for Canada, only to back off a few hours later.
You know, we have 20,000 or more members directly in that sector and thousands more that are in related industries.
Lunny says BC's steel fabrication industry will be hit the hardest. Not every sector is affected equally.
For the most part, I think business is as usual in the Elk Valley.
Sparwood Mayor David Wilkes says the trade war has yet to impact the region's metallurgical coal mines, which are mined for steel making.
It's going to China, India, Japan, South Korea. Very little of it goes to the United States.
Roughly 90% of Canada's steel and aluminum exports go to American companies, and most of it comes from Quebec. But BC does produce aluminum. The Rio Tinto BC Works smelter in Kitimat employs over 1,500 workers and contributes $500 million annually to the provincial economy.
We're going to continue to support our industries, whether it's Rio Tinto or others, to find ways to get to other markets.
In the meantime, business owners like Walji says that shift needs to happen fast.
We have to look for new markets. We have to find work in BC, in Canada.
Callon says the province will support business while stressing that the tariffs will inflict even more damage on the U.S. economy. Shoria Chetri, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC government says the Trump administration has paused negotiations on the Columbia River Treaty. It is the decades-old agreement that governs the supply of water and energy from BC to the Pacific Northwest. As Katie DeRosa explains, some are concerned it's become yet another bargaining chip in Trump's tariff fight.
Amid U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada and take our natural resources, the focus has turned to our water supply. Trump described it like this last year.
And they have essentially a very large faucet.
BC's energy minister has said the province cannot use its water supply as a bargaining chip because of the Columbia River Treaty. It's the 61-year-old agreement that governs hydroelectric power production and flood control along the 2,000-kilometer Columbia River that flows from BC down to several western U.S. states. Last summer, Canada and the U.S. under then-President Joe Biden reached an agreement in principle to update the treaty. But Adrian Dix says the Trump administration has now hit the pause button.
What's different here is the vicious anti-Canadian attacks that have been made on us on all these issues, and they do cause concern.
The New York Times reported that Trump raised the treaty as part of a host of grievances during a phone call last month with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Trudeau has said a key part of a modernized treaty is addressing Canada's concerns about sensitive ecosystems and Indigenous land. A former BC Environment Minister says the deal now appears to be collateral damage in the trade war.
It stalled out, and now, unfortunately, it seems to be caught up in some of this more general hostility being expressed by the Trump White House towards Canada.
A professor who has spent several decades studying the treaty says Trump may be poised to backtrack on the interim deal.
It's very concerning. So now having Trump come along, who I think is likely going to want to scuttle the whole deal.
But Adrian Dix notes either government has to give 10 years' notice to rip up the treaty, and he's confident it will not come to that. The Trump administration has given no indication on what it would take to restart the treaty negotiations. Analysts say it's another example of a once friendly Canada-U.S. relationship that has turned sour under the new president. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Amid those challenges, the province is also making a pitch to American doctors and nurses. Come practice here. The government hopes to attract more health professionals amid a shortage in BC. As Chad Pawson reports, that involves marketing and streamlined certification.
BC's Health Minister Josie Osborne says U.S. doctors and nurses have been contacting the province asking if they can work here.
With the uncertainty and chaos that's happening down south of the border, it certainly doesn't come as a surprise.
BC's response, a fast-tracked process from 5 to 8 months to just 6 weeks for doctors with American certifications to take up practice in BC. BC's also going after those U.S. doctors or nurses with an ad campaign, similar to what it did in the UK. Dr. Habib-ur-Rahman and his wife, also a physician, answered that call.
Since arriving, we've been amazed every day by the natural beauty here. We've also been warmly welcomed by so many British Columbians, and without fail, when they get to know that we're family doctors, they initially celebrate our arrival and immediately follow that up by asking, are you taking on new patients?
The announcement came on a raucous day in the BC legislature, with the opposition Conservatives grilling the government over not meeting healthcare needs in BC's fastest growing city, Surrey.
18-hour waits, pediatric care in portables, and unsafe working conditions for our frontline workers.
Surrey, despite this government trying to blame past governments all day long, has grown 200,000 residents since they took office, yet they have not kept up with the pace of growth.
The government has had a primary care strategy for 7 years. It's matched 675,000 people to a family doctor or nurse practitioner, but still 400,000 residents remain without, something the health minister says the U.S. Doctor Initiative will help with.
With 400,000 people on the Health Connect registry and doctors taking panels of up to 1,200 patients, say we can know that we're going to need dozens and dozens of doctors.
BC's U.S. doctor recruitment efforts will target Oregon, Washington, and California later this year, and hopefully not compete with efforts being made in other Canadian provinces such as Ontario, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. BC wants U.S. doctors to fill gaps here in cancer care, emergency rooms, and in rural communities. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Victoria.
Meanwhile, Interior Health has closed the Lillooet Hospital's emergency department for about 2 days as the province continues to struggle through a shortage of doctors. As Michelle Morton explains, a new staff may soon bring some ER stability to that small town.
We're in stiff competition with other sites and with other provinces.
Interior Health says the emergency department had to close between Monday morning and Wednesday morning after it could not secure a physician. Instead, anyone needing urgent care is being advised to call 911 for transport to the nearest facility in the meantime.
Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops, which is a 2-hour drive. There are two other hospitals, both 100 Mile and Nicola Valley Hospital, that are also about the same distance drive.
Between July and the end of last year, CBC News has counted nearly 24 ER closures at Lillooet Hospital. Similar closures have also been happening in rural communities throughout BC as the province faces a doctor and nursing shortage.
The ambulance service kind of becomes the healthcare system in these small communities.
He says paramedics are stepping up to transfer patients when there's longer commutes, but that extra travel can add more stress to the job.
They're no stranger to transporting from these communities to larger centers, but usually you can go to the local hospital to stabilize and get everything started. So it definitely does add pressure.
In a statement, the municipality's mayor writes that it's critical to find sustainable, long-lasting solutions to maintain consistent healthcare access. And ensuring consistent ER access is not just about patient care, it's also about supporting the dedicated healthcare professionals. BC's health minister recently said in the past 6 months, ER disruptions have decreased 40% in BC compared to the 6 months before that, and it's committed to hiring and recruiting more healthcare workers.
We have an additional physician starting at the end of this month, and we have 3 more physicians starting in September. So by the end of September, our physician gaps in Lillooet will actually be mitigated and completely filled.
Interior Health is optimistic these temporary closures may soon be a thing of the past in Lillooet. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Madavi is off, so Stephanie Hungerford is here with a look at the BC weather. Rain, wind, almost March-like.
Very, very March-like. Who would have thought? Yes, a lot of rain for the next 24 hours. Quite a bit in the Tofino region. They're going to see also really high gusts of wind, about 80 kilometers per hour. Gusty winds really throughout the south coast, about 40 kilometers for the lower mainland, also Victoria, all the way up the coast, Squamish as well. And we are going to see a lot of rain in Vancouver, but that'll ease up for Thursday, and lots of snow for the local mountains. So that's actually kind of exciting.
It is very nice. Thanks, Stephanie. Connecting with and counting people without homes, why volunteers are tallying the homeless after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Stream your favorite CBC dramas or comedies 24/7 on demand on the CBC Gem app. Plus, you can live stream CBC Vancouver News. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
BC's Real Estate Association says there was a sharp drop in home sales last month. Purchases fell by just under 10% across the province. As John Hernandez explains, tariffs and economic uncertainty could be making buyers think twice.
After a busy January, North Vancouver realtor Alex Tappan has noticed a slowdown.
We saw a huge spike in mortgage pre-approval requests over the past few months. That has slowed down a lot in February.
And he says there's a common theme from buyers who might be feeling indecisive.
I myself have a number of buyers who are ready to go, looking at stuff, but they're just not ready to write an offer. They're just waiting for that next interest rate announcement, the next tweet. You know, there's just too much uncertainty for people to jump in right now.
The BC Real Estate Association says economic uncertainty has stalled housing purchases in the province. Year-over-year sales dropped by 9% in February. Greater Vancouver saw an 11% drop. The Fraser Valley, a 27% decline. Economists say many buyers don't know how a trade war will impact their finances, so they're opting to wait.
It's really hard to make that decision if you're worried about whether or not you're going to be employed in the next 6 months. And you know, it doesn't help that, you know, the tariffs are on, then they're off, then they're on, then they're off, and now they're increasing.
The association says sales could plummet further in areas hit hardest by tariffs like BC's north and the interior. But the decline could be tempered if the Bank of Canada lowers interest rates.
The crystal ball is very fuzzy and very cloudy right now, especially over the next 6 months.
Still, amid economic challenges, there could be opportunity. Home prices have dropped over the year.
Take advantage of the fear. This is the kind of time where if you are pre-approved for a mortgage and you see something you like, you know, it's a good time to try an offer because sellers are willing to come down, especially on products that have been on the market for a few months.
Buying or selling, still no easy decision during unpredictable times. John Hernandez, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Hundreds of volunteers across Greater Vancouver are carrying out this year's point-in-time homeless count. It was last done 2 years ago. And as Rafferty Baker shows us, it showed a big jump in people without homes.
About 500 volunteers are fanning out across Greater Vancouver today. They'll be trying to find people living in vehicles, tents, shelters, couch surfing, anyone who doesn't have a safe place to call home.
So usually we're in groups of 2. With our surveys, we've had training to prepare for ourselves to, you know, connect with people that are experiencing homelessness, finding out about their circumstances, how long they've been homeless, you know, the reasons for their homelessness, what their fears are, what their experience has been like, essentially to help us understand how we can develop services and supports that can end homelessness.
David Wells says getting accurate numbers in shelters is usually pretty straightforward, but it gets more challenging locating people living in vehicles or on boats.
The count's always going to be an undercount. I mean, last time it was an increase by about 32%, so the previous numbers were always in the low to mid 3,000s. Last time represented a 32% jump, which is the biggest jump we'd ever seen.
In 2023, the count included 4,800 people experiencing homelessness. Wells says there's no way to say how the numbers will add up this time, but he says the situation out there looks similar now.
Homelessness is still a significant thing. I mean, we know the cost of living in Greater Vancouver is high.
The province says it will use the results to develop services and supports for people experiencing homelessness. Volunteers will have tobacco ties and food supports to offer as gestures to show the folks they're approaching that their goal is to help in good faith. Wells says it will be impossible to locate people in unstable housing, sleeping on couches, or in hard-to-reach areas. If that sounds like you can be counted today, Tuesday, March 11th, by anonymously calling or texting 236-330-9233. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's the Coho ferry backing out of its dock in Victoria and then setting sail for Port Angeles across the border in Washington State. It was a bit of a murky day for the sailing this morning. Stephanie Hungerford will have your BC-wide weather forecast coming up. We're hearing some major revelations in the Code of Conduct hearing for 3 Coquitlam Mounties accused of making racist and sexist comments in online chat groups. It comes just a day after one of the officers testified at length, defending the messages and claiming supervisors failed to manage job stress. We spoke with the CBC's Jason Proctor about the hearing earlier.
Yeah, Dan, so 2 really bombshell things happened today. The first is at 9:36 this morning, according to one of the lawyers for the RCMP officers, an email went out detachment-wide at the Coquitlam detachment from the Coquitlam detachment leadership attacking these officers, written, they said, by the superintendent of the detachment, attacking their evidence, and commenting, editorializing, he said, on what was said. So that's a big thing. They say that they're going to ask for a stay of proceedings because they accuse them of trying to actually intimidate witnesses, because remember, some of the defense witnesses here still work there. The other big thing is that one of the people concerned, so a female officer who these officers talked about mocking, calling her Big Sandy, making fun of her weight, she apparently contacted the RCMP last night and accused Ian Sullivan, the constable that testified, of lying about having apologized to her. She says that never happened, and she plans to take the stand tomorrow morning in what has become a really contentious hearing.
So beyond that, Jason, what happens next?
Well, so all eyes really on the proceedings tomorrow. We're going to hear from this constable, Sandra Moss, who says that one of the constables was lying. And we're also going to hear them make their case that, these whole stay of proceedings, that everything should be stopped right now and that this should go no further.
All right. Jason Proctor, thanks very much. After a frustrating week of on-again, off-again tariffs, many Canadians are confused and worried. What do the American people think of President Trump and his trade war? The CBC's Dan Takema visited New York State's St. Lawrence County, where 59% of voters cast their ballots for Trump in the last election.
It's just a modification, short term.
He wants us to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy.
We don't need trees from Canada. We don't need cars from Canada.
This week, Donald Trump put tariffs on our goods and our energy. Then he took them off, then he put them back again, then he took them off.
There's been a lot of tariff talk in the past week. Are they on? Are they off? Canadians are really concerned. So we wanted to find out what our American neighbors think, the ones so close they can see us.
We love our Canadian customers. We see them on a daily basis. But they just want to be able to, come back and forth. They don't focus on it. There's bigger struggles in life here right now. I hope it doesn't get to that point where there's so much division and hatred, because division is not good for anybody.
I think Trump's a fool for messing with our closest ally and nearest neighbor. I mean, it's Canada. We've been good friends and allies for years, so why mess that up?
I like Canada. My family came from Canada, and I love going over there.
I mean, I go to Cornwall and I go to Ottawa a lot, but right now, I don't know if we should, with what's been done.
Just because you're worried about how people will react? Are you scared of angry Canadians?
I've never been scared of people, and I don't find the Canadian people any different than we are.
Last election, 59% of voters here in St. Lawrence County cast their ballot for President Trump. Most of the people we spoke with today said they still support him, but tariffs, not so much.
I think he's trying to do the right thing, but I understand why they're complaining. We've helped them for so long, and they've helped us for so long.
I think he's going about it the wrong way. He's doing too much at one time. It's hard to believe.
I support him, but I don't support him for tariffs.
Yeah?
Not at all. Yeah. Especially with Canada, because we're so close, and it's like we've got a river between us, but that's it. We think it's crazy.
It's a big issue, but we got a lot of work to do over here, and if that can help,
I think it's going to ruin us. We're going to be starving.
Some believe the tariffs are necessary for the good of their country, and they're willing to trade what they hope will be short-term pain for long-term gain. Say you support President Trump and you support him in this?
Overall, if that's what has to be done for his overall message, well, we'll have to deal with that together. I mean, is Canada safer because of the United States? I think so. what do we spend on military versus what Canada spends on military? If you want to discuss it all, let's discuss it all. However, he's a bull in a china shop that gets stuff done, and that's hard sometimes.
And what do you make of these tariffs and the whole trade war that's going on with Canada?
Well, I believe what's fair is fair. Canada, they're our friends to the north and stuff, but we need to do what's best for the American economy.
Sorry, we're barging in on you.
Our President of the United States is the best thing that we've had in a long time. And we welcome him aboard. I'm 100% behind him. The tariffs can hurt, like anything, but sometimes you have to hurt to grow.
Tariffs isn't the big issue anymore, but they're making it something, a mountain out of a molehill. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. It's what people want it to be. You can sit back and be scared to death because, oh, look at the news media is telling us, oh my God, we're going to have to pay $10 for a loaf of bread. No, it's not going to happen. Will it hurt? I think we will have a little bit of trouble, but we can do it. We can do it. We've gotten through worse than this, and you can too.
For now, the trade war, or at least the tariffs, seem to be on pause, but there's still a lot of confusion. As we head back across the border, one thing is clear, that most of the people we spoke with today say they want to be good neighbors, and they don't think tariffs are going to help. Dan Takema, CBC News, Ogdensburg, New York.
The mighty Fraser needs a data boost. That is, if it's going to remain mighty, say some experts. Johanna Wagstaff will explain for you next. British Columbians already know how special the big and mighty Fraser River is. It's one of the last natural urban deltas in the world. But some experts say in order to keep it that way, we're missing something that other big rivers already have. The CBC's Johanna Wagstaff explains.
If you're watching from here, or here, or here, this is the biggest river in Western Canada. It's huge, it's undammed. It runs from the mountains through our most densely populated urban areas, and it's all natural, baby. And that makes it pretty special. But if we're not careful, it could look like this down the road, a maze of concrete passages completely devoid of biodiversity. That's what a new study from Simon Fraser University is worried about.
So the paper came about because there was a real need in the community to have a compilation of what knowledge we have around the geology and evolution of the Fraser Delta and Fraser River. Yeah, there's a couple things that really make the Fraser stand out. The first is actually how young it is. It's only about 9,500 years old. It's also a major salmon fishery. And so when people were looking to harvest salmon back in the early part of the 1900s, there was a push to not dam any of the tributaries along the Fraser River. And so it remains one of the largest rivers in the world that's actually almost completely undammed along its entire length, which means the sedimentation that happens in the delta reflects natural processes that are active in the catchment area.
The unsung hero of the Fraser River, the sediment. That's all of the sand, rocks, minerals that are transported down the river and deposited in a new location. And it's what's protecting the river from climate change.
Deltas are basically nature's sandcastle. They are the accumulation of sediment at the coastline. So rivers capture sediment in the catchment area and transport it to where it empties into the ocean. And so when the river enters the ocean, the flow slows down significantly, and that sediment is dumped. One of the biggest issues we have right now is the fact that we are dealing with a warming Earth. Those raising sea levels are going to then start to increase water levels in the Strait of Georgia. As we see that, the river's natural response is to aggregate, so we actually build sediment onto the delta itself, and we raise the whole surface of it in response to rising sea levels. Without sediment, the delta is going to shrink.
In order to protect the river from climate change, we have to protect the sediment. And in order to protect the sediment, we have to know what we're dealing with.
So in most parts of the world, major river systems like this would actually have a monitoring program where they measure the amount of sediment coming down the river, and they know how much sediment is being dredged. In the Fraser situation, we're making estimates and guesses, but we don't actually fully know how much sediment is being dredged out of the river.
The two greatest threats to losing sediment in our river is, number one, the impact of development projects, which can constrain the path of the river. And number two, the lack of sediment actually coming down from the mountains, which is made worse by dredging. That's the straight up removal of sediments to help ships pass through more easily. But the problem is, we just don't know how much we've lost, how much we have left, and the true impacts of these actions. We just don't have the data.
So if we don't actually manage delta sediment in the river, what ends up happening is we don't get enough sediment out onto the front of the delta. What ends up happening then is we erode out the salt marshes, and now we start to have water moving up right against the dikes. So the worst case scenario is that we remove a lot of those natural environments on the front of the delta itself. We then have to build up the dikes to protect the urban areas in behind them. So we lose our natural habitats, and we don't actually have a way for us to protect against increased wave activity, increased chance of flooding as a result of large storms and big tides.
We have to think about the kind of river delta we want in the future.
From the mighty Fraser to our mighty weather forecast across the province. Stephanie Hungerford, how's that for a segue? And we are getting, not bad, not top 10, but we are getting some rain down here and some snow elsewhere.
Yes, we are getting a lot of precipitation in the south coast over the next 24 hours, but that also means we're getting some snow moving into the BC central area of Prince George and Williams Lake. They're going to see about 2 centimeters of snow tonight and into tomorrow, as well as some thunder showers. We're also going to see some wet flurries, mostly in the interior, a little higher up elevation, about 1,100 meters and up. We're going to see snow. We are going to see some snow in the Kootenays, but not that much. much. It's going to be sort of a touch and go between flurries and rain for a lot of the region in BC. As we can see tonight, the temperatures are dropping up north. We're going to still see this this wind chill that we've been talking about for, you know, a whole winter. It's going to be down to minus 24 tonight. So still pretty cold up north. These temperatures are staying around 2 degrees, which is why we're still seeing some snow, even though it's almost mid-March. Tomorrow, we can see the sun is going to be coming out for a lot of the region, mostly in the afternoon, which will make for a really nice Thursday for a lot of the southern part of the province. But we're going to see thunder showers in Williams Lake and Prince George. So they're the ones that are really getting hit hard with this rain and snow over the next 48 hours or so. We can see that the temperatures are remaining kind of, you know, around the 10 region for Metro Vancouver, Victoria. We're warming up slightly in the interior. It's still a little cold up north, although Dease Lake is seeing some temperatures easing up slightly. And then we're going to go for our 5-day forecast in Metro Vancouver. And, you know, this has happened to me before. Rain, 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 and then in the middle we have this beautiful day. That's what I like to focus on.
Hey, we're gonna zero in on that giant glowing orb.
We're gonna zero in, so we're gonna see, you know, temperatures around 8, still low 2 degrees. You know, and right now it's still quite cold out when I went for my walk today, and then temperatures are gonna warm up for later in the weekend. But for those of you who like to ski, Thursday, because there will be fresh snow over on the mountains, and then Thursday should be absolutely gorgeous, just a few clouds in the sky. So there you go, Dan.
Very good. We will take it. Thank you, Stephanie. The U.S. says it is resuming military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine immediately. That about-face comes after talks between American and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia aimed at ending Russia's war against Ukraine. As Briar Stewart reports, Kiev also said it was open to a U.S. ceasefire proposal, subject to approval from the Kremlin.
The high-stakes talks were billed as a step towards peace and also a chance for the relationship between Washington and Kiev to be repaired. And after hours of meetings Tuesday, dramatic progress on both fronts, with the U.S. saying that Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day interim ceasefire.
So the shooting will stop, the killing will stop, the dying will stop, and the talks can begin about how to end this war permanently in a way that's acceptable and enduring for both sides.
But Russia still has to agree. And a few hours before the talks began, Ukraine sent a message. Dozens of drones attacked Moscow and the surrounding area. At least 3 were killed. We understood there was a war, said this woman, but we didn't properly realize it until now.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
It was less than 2 weeks ago that this fractious White House meeting between the presidents from U.S. and Ukraine led to Washington halting military aid and curbing the sharing of intelligence. Now officials say both are back on.
Today, we demonstrated to all the world that we want a peace.
But even if Russia agrees to an interim ceasefire, getting a peace agreement will be exceedingly difficult.
It's going to be very hard to build any kind of trust or confidence between Russia and Ukraine.
Walter Kemp is a security expert from Canada, but now based in Austria. He's part of a group strategizing how a deal could work.
The challenge is to actually get into the nitty-gritty of what the ceasefire means, how it works, and also how it's implemented. There's no point in having a ceasefire that's then broken the next day.
American officials say the ball is now in Russia's court. Steve Witkoff, a special envoy for the Trump administration, will be in Moscow this week. And the U.S. Secretary of State says if Russia rejects the deal, it will be clear just what the impediment is to peace. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been arrested on a warrant from the International Criminal Court. He was seized in Manila after arriving on a flight. The global court is charging the 79-year-old with crimes against humanity over a deadly anti-drug crackdown he oversaw during his term. Thousands of people in the Philippines died. Critics say authorities carried out extrajudicial killings. Duterte has always insisted police were told to kill only in self-defense. He unilaterally withdrew the Philippines from the ICC treaty in 2019 and maintains it has no jurisdiction. There's a lot to say on the legacy of violence under Duterte's presidency. Here to help us walk through it is Christina Corpin-Moser. She's the project director of Filipino BC. Thank you for joining us. First of all, could you explain why Duterte's arrest is so significant for Filipino people?
Yeah, so, I think it's significant not just for Filipino people, but for people in the region. Broadly speaking, this is the first warrant and arrest of a former leader anywhere in the region. And so I think this is like a landmark sort of arrest. This has not occurred in the region prior to this. And so certainly, there's impacts on the Philippines that are massive, but it's also just a hallmark sort of warrant and arrest for the region, broadly speaking.
And if I could ask you, what effect did his policies have on people in the Philippines and on their families abroad, especially here in BC, we have such a large Filipino population here?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that, while Duterte had international condemnation, that he remained quite popular in the Philippines. And had high approval ratings at the end of his presidency. Certainly, in British Columbia, the reactions to this news range from devastation to celebration. We have people here from the Philippines who are on asylum claim, who were politically red tagged and persecuted under Duterte's policies for speaking out against them. But broadly speaking, I would say that while people who are victims of these alleged crimes are hopeful, there's probably an equal amount of condemnation for the ICC's arrest of him as well.
Now, in a statement you wrote that Duterte's war on drugs was a war on the poor. Do you still maintain that?
Yeah, so human rights groups and political activists have noted that while the extrajudicial killings allegedly conducted by Duterte during his presidency was to target this war on drugs, there are a number of people who were killed who were neither drug dealers nor drug users, and in fact, the vast majority of people were the urban poor. And so,
Christina Corpin-Moser, my apologies, we'll have to leave it there for time. We very much appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you for joining us today.
Take care. Bye.
It's a city known for punching well above its weight when it comes to music. It's created some big acts over time, but finding a place to play, that's become a challenge. We're going to take you to some unusual stages next.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
It's not as big as Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, but throughout the years, Victoria has created some big music acts.
But with massive redevelopment in the capital region, finding a place to play has become more of a challenge. Rohith Joseph takes a visit to some unusual spots where music is still front stage.
I'm here in Victoria, a city that likes to pride itself for its vibrant art scene. But the last few years have been rough for local live music venues, with beloved spots like Logan's, the Victoria Event Center, and Quadratic Sound having to close their doors. The good news is that local musicians and music lovers are not waiting around. They're creating their own live music spaces using whatever they have, like this photography studio behind me. I'm here to meet Neil James, the frontman of the Victoria band Astrocolor, and his friend Antonia LaFauci, who's the owner of Cinderblock Studios. It's a photography studio that's quickly becoming a creative space, hosting live comedy and most recently, live music. Neil was super gung-ho to do this, despite all the work it took to make it happen. How's it going?
How's it going?
Good to see you, Neil.
Nice to meet you, Tony.
Oh, nice to meet you, Tony. Cool space you got here.
Thank you very much.
Can I check it out?
Absolutely, let's show you around. Here's upstairs, I'll show you. We have a bit of a lounge meeting area. So redid the floors, redid the lighting, stone countertops, new appliances, the big fake plant wall back there. I was a punk rock kid growing up, and I used to go to lots of punk shows and lots of like house party shows and stuff like that. And I kind of like the just getting people together and having, you know, people be able to showcase their creativity. Certainly we have lost venues in this town, especially the smaller venues, what I think of as kind of the lower rungs on the ladder. And so this I kind of see as the training ground. Where do we go to organize our ideas, to know that when we do go to put on a show, when we do go get a booking at a venue, you know, these songs are vetted. We've seen how they go over with other artists. We know where our strengths are.
So here's the thing, Cinderblock isn't the only alternative to traditional live music venues. I'm right in front of Little Fernwood Gallery. It's a community art gallery that musicians are holding DIY shows at. What do I mean by DIY? It's basically any space where musicians, artists convert it into a live music venue. And they bring their own equipment, they bring their own audience, they bring their own tickets and everything. And this space has become really valuable for that. Tyler Akis organizes shows here, and he says the vibes are amazing.
There's obviously so much talk about there not being access to rentable spaces, but yet I find myself exhausted from going to so many shows because there is so much stuff happening, and it is really interesting that when you're looking at that, it is most of the time at a community space.
Welcome, this is my backyard. This is the first house show of this season, and I hope you can hear me.
For Victoria Levesque, the idea of DIY music is quite literal. She hosts concerts at her own house.
I'm never lost on the fact that when you put the time and effort into hosting artists, and if you're gonna get jazzed by that excitement of, if I'm hosting someone that I believe in, I know it's not just for that one day, it is for the future of their career.
So can a city's music scene survive on DIY spaces? That's up for debate. But the encouraging thing to see here is that even in an expensive city like Victoria, artists are making live music happen, by any means. So before you splurge hundreds of dollars on a pop superstar, maybe give that local band at your local community center or house concert a shot. For CBC News, I'm Rohith Joseph.
You can just bust into somebody's living room. It's very Victoria. I love that story. That's cool.
Come to my backyard.
Yeah.
Why not?
Backyards, they're fun.
Well, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and at our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.